Coldbrook was the kind of town that seemed perpetually caught in the gentle embrace of yesteryear. Nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests, it was a place where everyone knew each other's names and the pace of life moved with a comforting slowness. The streets were lined with charming, old-fashioned houses, and the town square was dominated by a grand, ancient building, the Coldbrook Public Library. The library had stood for over a century, its Gothic architecture and towering stone facade giving it an air of solemnity and mystery. Ivy clung to its walls, and its high arched windows seemed to watch over the town with a timeless gaze. Inside, the library was a haven for book lovers. Its narrow aisles were lined with towering shelves, filled to the brim with dusty volumes and forgotten tomes. The scent of old paper and polished wood filled the air, and the silence was broken only by the soft rustle of pages turning and the occasional whisper. Alex Turner was a familiar face in the library. A local historian and bibliophile, Alex had a deep love for the written word and the stories that books could tell. Tall and lanky, with a perpetually curious expression and a penchant for tweed jackets, he was well acquainted with the library's every nook and cranny. He spent countless hours there, often losing himself in the past as he delved into historical texts and ancient manuscripts. Mrs. Hazelwood, the elderly librarian, had managed the library for decades. She was a small, sprightly woman with a kind face etched with wrinkles and eyes that sparkled with a deep love for books. Her silver hair was always neatly pinned up, and she moved with a quiet grace, her hands ever busy with the care and maintenance of the library's treasures. She and Alex had developed a warm camaraderie over the years, bound by their mutual love of literature and history. One bright spring morning, Alex found himself in the attic of the library, helping Mrs. Hazelwood with the daunting task of spring cleaning. The attic was a dusty, forgotten space filled with old newspapers, ancient maps, and other relics of the past. "Thank you for helping me with this, Alex," Mrs. Hazelwood said, her voice soft but steady. "These old bones aren't what they used to be." "It's my pleasure, Mrs. Hazelwood," Alex replied, lifting a box of old periodicals. "I love spending time here. It feels like I'm uncovering history." As they sorted through the attic's contents, Alex's attention was drawn to a large, leather-bound book tucked away in a dark corner. The book's cover was cracked and worn, the leather faded from age. Intrigued, he carefully pulled it out and wiped away the thick layer of dust. "Mrs. Hazelwood, look at this," Alex called, holding up the book. The librarian turned, her eyes widening with recognition and a hint of unease. "Ah, the library's ledger," she said quietly. "I haven't seen that in years." "The library's ledger," Alex echoed, curiosity piqued. Mrs. Hazelwood nodded. "Yes, it records every book ever checked out from this library, dating back to when it first opened. It's a fascinating piece of history." Alex opened the ledger, and his eyes widened in wonder as he flipped through the pages. The entries were written in elegant, flowing script, chronicling the library's history through its borrowers. Names of people long gone, the titles of books they had borrowed, and the dates of their visits were all meticulously recorded. As he reached the more recent entries, however, he noticed something strange. The neat handwriting gave way to jagged, erratic lines written in an indecipherable cipher. The symbols seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy, and a sense of foreboding crept over him. "What do you make of this?" Alex asked, showing Mrs. Hazelwood the bizarre entries. Her expression grew serious, and she sighed deeply. "I've heard stories about this," she said. "Legends, really. They say that some entries appear in a strange cipher, a code that no one has been able to decipher. Those who tried, well, let's just say their lives took a turn for the worse." A shiver ran down Alex's spine, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear. "Do you mind if I take some photos of these entries? Maybe I can figure out what they mean." Mrs. Hazelwood hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful, Alex. Some things are best left undisturbed." The ancient ledger, with its cracked leather cover and strange cipher, weighed heavily on Alex's mind as he sat in his study that evening. The room was a cozy refuge, its walls lined with bookshelves filled with volumes on history, literature, and the occult. A large wooden desk sat in the center, cluttered with papers, notebooks, and an old typewriter that Alex occasionally used for his historical articles. Alex spread the photos of the ledger's peculiar entries across his desk, the strange symbols almost seeming to dance in the flickering light of the desk lamp. He had always been drawn to puzzles and mysteries, and the cipher in the ledger was a challenge he couldn't resist. He began by cross-referencing the symbols with various code-breaking books he owned. Hours passed as he meticulously analyzed the strange script, comparing it to known ciphers and codes. His eyes grew weary, but his determination never wavered. As midnight approached, he finally made a breakthrough. "Beware," he murmured, the word emerging from the chaotic jumble of symbols. A sense of unease settled over him, but he pressed on, driven by a need to uncover the ledger's secrets. Piece by piece, the cipher began to unravel, each decoded entry telling a bizarre and often terrifying tale that mirrored the plots of the very books listed beside them. One particular entry caught his eye. Dated only a few weeks prior, it detailed the checkout of a rare horror book titled The Haunting of Blackwood Manor by none other than Alex Turner. The decoded message sent chills through him. "Those who read the tale will live its horrors." Alex's heart pounded as he recalled the book, now sitting innocently on his nightstand. He had checked it out on a whim, drawn by its antique cover and promise of a gripping story. Now, it seemed, he was bound to its dark narrative. The next morning, bleary-eyed and anxious, Alex decided to return to the library. He needed to speak with Mrs. Hazelwood to see if she knew anything more about the ledger and its cryptic entries. But when he arrived, he found the library closed. A sign on the door read, "Closed for unforeseen circumstances." A sense of dread settled over him as he peered through the library's windows. The interior was dark and still, and there was no sign of Mrs. Hazelwood. He tried calling her, but his calls went unanswered. With a sinking feeling, he realized that he was on his own. One evening, as he was piecing together the latest decoded entry, a name caught his eye: Elizabeth Hazelwood. His heart raced as he read the details. Mrs. Hazelwood's grandmother, a librarian who had mysteriously disappeared in the 1920s after reportedly finding the ledger. With this revelation, Alex realized that Mrs. Hazelwood must know more than she had let on. Determined to find her, he set out for her home, a small cottage on the outskirts of town. As he approached, he saw that the windows were dark and the door was slightly ajar. Stepping inside, he called out, "Mrs. Hazelwood, it's Alex. Are you here?" The silence was oppressive, the air thick with dust and decay. He moved through the rooms, searching for any sign of the elderly librarian. In the study, he found her journal, its pages filled with frantic notes and sketches of the ledger's symbols. A final entry, written in a shaky hand, turned his blood to ice. The ledger's curse is real. Beware the book. Beware the shadows. They come for those who seek the truth. As he stood there, the weight of the journal in his hands, Alex heard a faint whisper, a susurrus of voices that seemed to come from all around him. The room grew colder, and the shadows lengthened, creeping toward him like living things. Clutching the journal, he fled the cottage, the whispers following him into the night. As he reached his home, he slammed the door behind him, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had uncovered too much, and now the darkness was closing in. The ledger, the book, and the library were all pieces of a dark puzzle he was now a part of. A puzzle that held terrifying consequences for those who dared to decipher its secrets. With trembling hands, Alex locked the doors and windows, the final words of Mrs. Hazelwood's journal echoing in his mind. Beware the book. Beware the shadows. Alex Turner's life had become a waking nightmare. As he delved deeper into The Haunting of Blackwood Manor, the boundary between the book's chilling plot and his reality began to disintegrate. Objects in his home shifted on their own, eerie noises filled the air, and ghostly apparitions flickered at the edge of his vision. The book's sinister influence seemed to reach into his very soul, warping his perception of the world around him. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex returned to the library and began to explore its dusty, forgotten corners. While searching the basement, he discovered a hidden passageway behind a loose stone. Following it, he stumbled upon a secret room filled with ancient texts and occult artifacts. Among them were records detailing the library's history and a series of mysterious disappearances over the decades. Piecing together the clues, Alex realized that the ledger's entries and the book's plot were intertwined, part of a malevolent force tied to the library. The disappearances were not random. Each person who vanished had interacted with the ledger or the cursed book. The horror that plagued him was just the latest manifestation of this dark legacy. Alex formulated a plan. He would stay in the library overnight, armed with his newfound knowledge and resolve. As midnight approached, he settled in, the ledger and the book laid out before him. The library was eerily quiet, the oppressive stillness broken only by the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the main hall. As the clock struck 12, the library came alive with the horrors from The Haunting of Blackwood Manor. Shadows danced on the walls, ghostly figures drifted through the aisles, and disembodied whispers filled the air. In the flickering candlelight, he noticed a new entry appearing in the ledger, written in the strange cipher. His hands trembled as he deciphered it, the message chilling him to the core. Alex Turner, the one who sought the truth, shall meet his end this night. He was now part of the dark history that had claimed so many before him.